Magovanen, my name is Wojnik, and in today's video I'm gonna try to answer a burning Rings of Power question. Where is Sauron? Who is Sauron? Why is Sauron? Of course, this video relies heavily on in-depth speculations, rumors and leaks, and may even, if I'm correct, spoil one of the show's biggest plot twists. So, spoiler alert, watch out and take care. Even before the official marketing campaign has begun, debate over Sauron's identity in the show heated the fandom even more than Sauron's hand heated Gil-galad during their duel. Oops, spoilers, I warned you. When the first casting info and story details leaked, people tried to figure out which of the revealed characters could potentially be the future Lord of Barad-dûr. At the time, there were two candidates, the so-called Meteor Man and Oren. Oren, whom we now know as Adar, seemed like the most obvious candidate. Too obvious, even. According to the casting info, Oren was said to be straight up the show's villain. When his first character poster had been revealed, it stoked up Sauron's speculations even more. I mean, just look at this poster and tell me that Sauron wouldn't be the first person to come to your mind. However, further leaks extinguished this theory. First, we've learned that this character wasn't Sauron, but someone much more minor. Adar, tortured, corrupted elf, leading a band of orcs on a quest to find a mysterious talisman. Then, as Cooper claimed, that Adar may even be one of Galadriel's brothers, Angrod or Egnor, since Finrod is confirmed to be properly dead in the show. The problem with this is that both of them had golden hair, both of them canonically died in the First Age, and both of them didn't seem likely to succumb to evil when captured and tortured, having seen the light of the two trees. The final trailer, the one with shitty music, has confirmed that Adar indeed has an elven body. So how does that work? Well, there are a few possibilities. He could be one of the elves captured by Morgoth in the ancient times when the first elves awoke. In one of the versions of Tolkien's Legendarium, the one that the show seems to follow, those elves were corrupted into first orcs. Adar doesn't look very orcish though. According to the leaks, at the start of the filming, Adar's costume and prosthetics were indeed very orc-like and evil-looking, but for some reason the higher-ups at Amazon changed his costume and design to be more regal-looking and elf-like. That's where the second possibility comes in. He could have been captured after the Battle of the Sudden Flame. Many elves were captured at the time and were made thralls in Angband. It is said in the Silmarillion that Morgoth offered false freedom to some of them, but their wills were chained to his, and they strayed only to come back to him again. If any captives actually escaped, they had little welcome among their people, and wandered alone, outlawed and desperate, for the elves didn't trust that they escaped in truth, and believed that they fulfilled Morgoth's will as spies. Therefore, Adar could be one of those escaped thralls, either one truly serving Morgoth, or one shunned by his people, outlawed and desperate, who in the end found his new family among the orcs, as weird as it sounds. There is also a third theory, my own, linked to necromancy and barrow wights from Fellowship of the Ring book, but I will delve into it in my next video focused on Adar himself. Right now, let's focus on Sauron. Whoever Adar is, by attacking the Southlands in Mordor with orcs, he seems to either follow Sauron's orders, or, more likely, just fill the evil power vacuum until the Dark Lord comes and takes over. He isn't Sauron himself though. The leaks are adamant about that, stating that Adar, although portrayed as the new Dark Lord, and Season 1's big bad, is not Sauron, but he will actually face off against Sauron in the village of Tir-Harad towards the end of the season. Remember this information, it will be useful when we get to our third and fourth candidate. Now, the second of the first two Sauron candidates, the Meteor Man, was much less of an obvious choice. The only thing we knew about him at the time was that he will come to Middle-earth in Meteor and will be connected to the Harfoot storyline, maybe even befriending the hobbits, as hinted by the first sneak peek. He seemed like the most mysterious and weird of the leaked characters, and so the theories were plentiful. Most people believed, and still believe, that he's one of the Blue Wizards, Morinehtar or Romestamo, who were part of the Istari. In the latest version of Tolkien's Legendarium, those two arrived to Middle-earth not in the Third Age, like Gandalf, Saruman and Radagast, but earlier, in the Second Age. The showrunners, when asked about bringing Olorin, Kurumo and Iwendil to the show, said that those three are, quote-unquote, not the only beings in that class, which seems to hint at the stranger being a Blue Wizard or a Maya original to the show, some sort of proto-Istari. Next week I'm gonna make a video about what it means for his storyline with the Harfoots. Still, some people believe that the Meteor Man is in fact Sauron in a shabby disguise. Imagine this scenario. The stranger, throughout the whole season, becomes more and more friendly and protective, traveling with the Harfoots, protecting them from dangers, and in the final episode, all of a sudden he flips, kills most of them, and is revealed to be Sauron. That sounds like a TV show worthy, dramatic plot twist, doesn't it? Sure, but it's improbable. Even in hiding, Sauron wouldn't pay any attention to being so insignificant as the Halflings. Also, Meteor Man's leaked casting call said that he vacillates between stubborn gravitas and a sense of sweetness and innocence. An enigmatic figure, he is initially curious, childlike, and very out of place from his surroundings, but with a deep and primal sense of purpose that drives him underneath it all. It sounds a lot like an Istari, and not very much like Sauron, unless he has lost his memory for some reason after Morgoth's defeat, which sounds weird and didn't happen in any of Tolkien's writings. It is possible in the show, but improbable. Now let's examine the third candidate, who suddenly emerged from the San Diego Comic-Con trailer, Slim Shady himself. When Eminem was first revealed, most of the internet quickly jumped the gun, convinced that this is Sauron. The clues were there. The character looked pale and creepy, could conjure fire, seemingly summoned a Balrog, and was accompanied by Muriel's words,
"Evil does not sleep. It waits."
Even Fellowship of Fans, the biggest and most reliable Rings of Power scoop account, tweeted that this is in fact Sauron, played by Anson Boone. The problem was, this isn't Boone. This is not even a man. This is an actress called Bridie Season. When people started pointing it out, Fellowship quickly backtracked from their previous statement, first saying that this isn't Boone, but Season, and then that Boone isn't even playing Sauron. So, who is Bridie playing then? Thanks to the official tracklist for the soundtrack, we can safely assume that the show refers to Slim Shady and her companions as mystics. This aligns with most of the theories which give her the role of a cultist of Morgoth. In the books, the cult of Morgoth was founded and led by Sauron in Númenor during Ar-Pharazôn's reign, but in the show, it wouldn't be that much of a deviation if, for example, Easterling descendants of people who fought for Morgoth worshipped him in the east even before Sauron started the cult in Númenor. After all, an executive producer stated that Season's character comes specifically from the east, from the lands of Rhûn. Now, assuming she isn't Sauron, what is her and her mystics' goal in Season 1? They are evil. That seems to be very clearly implied. They could have the same objective as Adar, gathering forces of evil in Middle-earth. Maybe they are even working for him. But they could also be looking for Sauron himself, to serve him, or already be working for him to gather forces in his name. In that case, they would be working against Adar, since Adar is portrayed as the new Dark Lord, and in the end Sauron is going to face off against the impostor. Easterlings serving Sauron already in the Second Age makes sense within the lore. In the Peoples of Middle-earth, we read that Sauron had acquired dominion over many savage tribes in the east of old, corrupted by Morgoth, and he now urged them to seek land and booty in the west. Of the Easterlings in the Third Age, it is said that they were mostly men of cruel and evil kind, descendants of those who had served and worshipped Sauron before his overthrow at the end of the Second Age. Now, could Bridie still be playing Sauron disguised as a priestess? Theoretically yes, but there is evidence against that, if the leaks are to be believed. Sauron, reportedly spotted on the sets of Tirharad village, was said to be a mysterious, hooded, robed, yet menacing figure, very intimidating. Now, it's debatable whether Slim Shady is menacing and intimidating, but she sure is mysterious, hooded and robed. Could the leak refer to Bridie's season? The answer is no. It's been reported that Sauron shows his face in only one scene, and we've seen Bridie's face a bunch of times already, in at least 2 different scenes and settings in promotional materials. Of course, it could be possible that in Tirharad he changes his form from the mystic into his main form, but then it wouldn't make sense for him to be disguised as the female cultist in the first place. Every time Sauron has changed his form in the books, it was for a specific purpose. He was a werewolf when he fought Huan, the Hound of Valinor, a snake when he tried to escape Huan's jaws, a vampire when he had to quickly flee in shame, and finally a fair form when he wanted to repent before Eonwe and later to trick the elves as Annatar. However, there seems to be no reason for him to disguise himself as a female cultist among the mystics, since according to the leak from Tirharad set, the hooded and robed figure, believed to be Sauron, leads a group of men somewhere and is celebrated by them in a chant. It's very likely that those men are the mystics celebrating Sauron's return. In that case, there is no reason for him to hide his true visage from them beforehand. He could be disguised as a priestess to fool other peoples of Middle-earth, but then Bridie, in all her trailer appearances, seems to be either alone or in the presence of only the mystics. We went through 3 candidates for Sauron's identity in the show, and none of them seem to actually be the Dark Lord, judging by the presented evidence. Does that mean he's played by someone we haven't seen in promotional materials? Not necessarily.
But they were all of them deceived. For another
candidate was made possible.
We have one final candidate left to consider.
Halbrand.
Halbrand?
What?
This Halbrand? The human? Yes. Please hear me out. First, let's do a little recap of what we know officially about the guy. According to his actor, Charlie Vickers, Halbrand hails from the Southlands, like Theo and Bronwyn, but not necessarily from Tirharad. We'll most likely be introduced to him stranded with Galadriel in the middle of the Sundering Seas, incredibly far from his home, on a raft or shipwreck. According to Vickers, meeting Galadriel makes Halbrand question so many things in his past, and then it also makes him reassess the kind of man he might be in the future. There will be other people with them on the raft, but in the end, only Galadriel and Halbrand will survive long enough to be rescued by Elendil and his crew and transported to Númenor. There, they will be brought before the court of Miriel and Pharazôn, where Halbrand will act as a conciliator between the Númenóreans and Galadriel. Afterwards, both her and Halbrand are escorted to jail, during which time Halbrand secretly gets Galadriel's dagger from Elendil and later hands it over to Galadriel in that controversial pseudo-romantic scene. There will also be an altercation between Galadriel and the guards. Now, it's unclear how Galadriel and Halbrand will go from Númenórean prisoners to Númenórean allies, but they will. They will both receive armor and weapons, and will travel with Miriel and her army to Middle-earth to defend the Southlands, which I've covered in the previous video. According to Charlie Vickers, Hal comes into the series trying to start a new life, to escape from his past and also from his people. However, Vickers also points out that maybe at this point in his life, Halbrand isn't necessarily running from his past. He has realized that he doesn't want to be there at all anymore, so he has just left it, and it doesn't feel like anything's chasing him at that point. Interestingly, says Charlie, when he meets Galadriel, she almost creates the thing that he's running from, in that before he meets her, he's done with whatever he was doing before. But she lights this flame in him, that maybe there is something in his past, that he can return to, which aligns with those lines from the trailer.
I am not the hero you seek.
Whatever it was you did, be free of it.
Now, of course, it sounds like Halbrand was simply a Southlander criminal of sorts, who is trying to escape his criminal past and find a new life. On the surface, it doesn't sound like Sauron, obviously. But let's now examine Tolkien's writings on what Sauron did in the beginning of the Second Age. This quote comes from the Silmarillion. When Tangorodrim was broken and Morgoth overthrown, Sauron put on his fair hue again and did obeisance to Eonwe, the herald of Manwë, and abjured all his evil deeds. And some hold that this was not at first falsely done, but that Sauron in truth repented, if only out of fear, being dismayed by the fall of Morgoth and the great wrath of the lords of the West. But it was not within the power of Eonwe to pardon those of his own order, and he commanded Sauron to return to Aman and there receive the judgment of Manwë. Then Sauron was ashamed, and he was unwilling to return in humiliation and to receive from the Valar a sentence, it might be, of long servitude in proof of his good faith. For under Morgoth his power had been great. Therefore, when Eonwe departed, he hid himself in Middle-earth, and he fell back into evil, for the bonds that Morgoth had laid upon him were very strong. Then there is also this short, similar quote from Morgoth's ring. Manwë knew of Sauron, of course. He had commanded Sauron to come before him for judgment, but had left room for repentance and ultimate rehabilitation. Sauron had refused, and had fled into hiding. I hope at this point you can see where my theory is headed. Halbrand could be the early Second Age Sauron. Sauron who, in Amazon's interpretation, repented in truth, even if only temporarily, and out of fear. Sauron who fled into hiding ashamed and didn't fall back into evil just yet. Now compare this with Charlie Vicker's words about Halbrand leaving his past behind, etc. It does sound like a repentant Sauron, doesn't it? Charlie says that Galadriel creates the thing that he's running from and lights this flame in him, that maybe there is something in his past that he can return to. Maybe this refers to Galadriel taking Halbrand with her to fight against Adar. Maybe in the Southlands, Sauron Halbrand will see that the forces of evil are in disarray, chaotic, that Adar isn't the proper leader for the orcs. And then Sauron will decide to become the Dark Lord Middle-earth needs but doesn't deserve. After all, Sauron was a control freak. He was obsessed with order. Even before Melkor ensnared him, he loved planning and coordination, and disliked confusion and chaos. Then there is also a possibility that Sauron Halbrand is already back to his evil ways, already scheming against the peoples of Middle-earth. According to one leak, Halbrand either causes one of the shipwrecks at the Sundering Seas, or intentionally saves Galadriel only, leaving other people on the raft to die. According to that Silmarillion, seeing the desolation of the world, Sauron said in his heart that the Valar, having overthrown Morgoth, had again forgotten Middle-earth, and his pride grew apace. He looked with hatred on the Eldar, and he feared the men of Númenor who came back at whiles in their ships to the shores of Middle-earth. But for long he dissembled his mind and concealed the dark designs that he shaped in his heart. In the Peoples of Middle-earth, we read that when first Númenorian ships reached Middle-earth, Sauron came out of hiding and revealed himself in fair form. For long he paid little heed to dwarves or men and endeavored to win the friendship and trust of the Eldar. But slowly he reverted again to the allegiance of Morgoth and began to seek power by force, marshalling again and directing the orcs and other evil things of the First Age, and secretly building his great fortress in the mountain-girt land in the south that was afterwards known as Mordor. Even though Halbrand, being a seemingly ordinary human, is far from Sauron's fair form, his storyline seems to match this description. He slowly gains Galadriel's friendship and trust, and hasn't yet begun to seek power by force, but soon might. Now, of course, we know that Tolkien's Galadriel never trusted Sauron when he posed as an emissary of the Valar. From Unfinished Tales, we learn that Annatar perceived at once that Galadriel would be his chief adversary and obstacle, and he endeavored therefore to placate her, bearing her scorn with outward patience and courtesy. Christopher Tolkien adds here that no explanation is offered in this rapid outline of why Galadriel scorned Sauron, unless she saw through his disguise, or of why, if she did perceive his true nature, she permitted him to remain in Eregion. Because the lore isn't exactly clear here, this is where things get slightly complicated. If Galadriel saw through Sauron's Annatar disguise, then she should see through Halbrand's disguise as well. In that case, either Halbrand isn't Sauron, or Amazon, contrary to criticism, is making Galadriel ignorant and blind even. But if she couldn't see through Annatar, then it's possible that she can't see through Halbrand as well. It would be incredibly ironic if Sauron, for whom she's looking with such dedication, would be right under her very nose. If Halbrand is Sauron who is already scheming, then his plan right now seems focused on getting to the elves through Galadriel. Sure, he'll get to Numenor with her in the first season, and whatever he sees there, for example the disdain for everything elvish, the discord, the moral decline, it will all be taken into his consideration. But he won't work against Numenorians yet. That happens later down the line. Sauron hated the Numenorians because of the deeds of their fathers and their ancient alliance with the elves, but at this point he paid little heed to men, scheming against the elves only. Now, among many problems with my grand theory about Halbrand being Sauron, there's the fact that using a modest human guise won't get him far in the Elven kingdoms. But maybe at this point he doesn't want to influence yet, but simply just to spy around, and maybe thinks that posing as someone grander would make him more sus. Or maybe he doesn't have the Annatar plan figured out yet. After all, we know from the leaks that at some point in Season 1, Celebrimbor and the dwarves will forge their first rings by themselves. Not their rings of power, just the first lesser rings. So in the show, the idea of magic rings won't come from Sauron. He will only help the elves of Eregion improve their craft later as Annatar. One final evidence that Halbrand could be Sauron is that Vickers worked with a dialect coach on the set, and there's one secret dialect that he's especially fond of.
Is there one that you're really good at?
One dialect?
Yeah.
I mean, there's one that I've developed and I've gotten a good grip on, but I don't want to say it yet because you'll probably hear it in the show.
The interviewer thinks that he's talking about the Elvish dialect, and Charlie plays off that, but what if he was talking about the Black speech? Alright, but what if Halbrand isn't Sauron? Who is he in that case? I have a specific theory in that regard. We know from Charlie Vickers that he comes from the Southlands and is running from his life, apparently regretting his past deeds. Of course, he couldn't have been serving Morgoth in the First Age, because then, at the time of the show, he would have to be from between 1000 to 3000 years old. The compressed timeline of the show makes the exact age hard to calculate, but you get the point. In that case, he could be a former quote-unquote modern-day Morgoth cultist. Maybe he even belonged to the mystics from Rhûn, whom we see in the trailers. So my theory, in case he isn't Sauron, is that Halbrand at some point in his life decided to escape his cultist life and fled west. Either he originally lived in the Southlands, or he comes from Rhûn, and after his escape he temporarily lived in the Southlands. In the second case, my theory gets even more specific and crazy. What if, when leaving the mystics, he took something with him? Something important, that the mystics want back really bad, and that's why they came west. We know from the leaks that Adar is looking for a mysterious talisman in the Southlands. We know that some mysterious chanting people will be present in Tir Harad. We also have this official promo picture of Halbrand in Numenor holding something in his hand. Could it be the said talisman? What if he stole it from the mystics, fled to Tir Harad, and lived there for a while, but realizing that he's being chased, he escaped further west, to the sea. And now both Adar and the Mystics have independently tracked him to the Southlands, looking for the talisman that may be connected to Morgoth or Sauron. This theory makes so much sense that I kinda don't want him to be Sauron anymore. Maybe the talisman is the key to Sauron's return, and that's why the Mystics and Adar want it. What if Sauron has actually lost his memory after the First Age, and the talisman can bring it back? It sounds stupid in the book context, but with Amazon we have to be prepared for stupid, and it would be plausible in the show's context. In that case, the stranger could actually be Sauron. That would connect the Harfoot storyline with the Southlands and the Mystics, which kinda makes sense. Harfoot's storyline is the only one seemingly disconnected from any other storyline, which it should be, taking lore into consideration, but most likely won't be. If you take a look at this map from the recent Harfoot's featurette, you can see that their storyline takes place in the lands right above Mordor, in southwestern Rhovanion, near future Dagorlad, where the battle between Sauron's forces and the last alliance of elves and men will take place. It's relatively close to the Southlands, and on the way from Rhûn. Of course, the talisman could also be Sauron's broken sword, found by Theo. In that case, Halbrand didn't steal it, which actually makes sense. Vickers did say that it doesn't feel like anything's chasing him at that point. Still, Halbrand could be a former mystic who wants to leave his former life behind and finds a chance for redemption with Galadriel when they both go to the Southlands to fight against the forces of evil. Now, whether or not any of those theories are correct, and whatever your opinion on the Rings of Power is, you have to admit, Amazon did a damn good job in confusing fans with Sauron's secret identity and encouraging a lot of theories, despite a couple of leaks slipping past the watchful eye of Jeffy B along the way. Alright, that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it and that at least one of my guesses regarding Sauron's identity is correct. Making this video took longer than I anticipated and promised, and I apologize for that. I will see you in the next video dedicated to my theory about Adar. Namarie.